up, Snort Dude crew? It's yours truly, Snort that dude. Right now, about to get into the how to kill your best friends, the Melly murders. Right. Anyway, there's a link to this down in the description. Without further ado, we're gonna get into it. Oh, let me tell you about the Motion Club. Motion Club's a clothing brand I started, everybody. MotionClub.us is the website. Go check it out. First link in the description.
Really?
In the early morning hours of October the 26th, 2018, a car rolled into the emergency room entrance in Miramar, Florida, carrying a story that would soon shock the world. In the driver's seat was 19-year-old Cortland Henry, better known as YNW Bortland, a member of the world-famous YNW rap collective, fronted by YNW Melly, a superstar rapper in the making. Meanwhile, in the passenger seats laid his two close friends and fellow YNW artists, 19-year-old Christopher Thomas Jr., aka YNW Juvie, and 21-year-old Anthony Williams, aka YNW Sack Chaser, both of them riddled with gunshot wounds and pronounced dead shortly after arrival. That tragic night would mark the beginning of a legal and media firestorm that continues to this very day. According to Bortland, the trio had been the victims of a drive-by shooting, but the police would quickly realize that something wasn't adding up, or to be more precise, nothing was adding up. And at the heart of the story was none other than YNW Melly himself, as the investigators would uncover a growing mountain of evidence that didn't just place Melly in the car, but pointed to the unthinkable conclusion that he was actually the one that had pulled the trigger and executed two of his closest friends, people he had known since childhood. Now, 7 years later, Melly still...
Man, I ain't gonna lie, when this first dropped, I was baffled, gang. I couldn't even believe it. I couldn't even believe it to the point where I'm like, nah, he couldn't have did. But now, as we looked at the meat and potatoes of the case, gang, feeling like Melly is a real emotion now.
Still remains locked up behind bars while waiting to find out his fate. Yet it seems that some of the craziest twists in this case just keep coming.
Melly was on FaceTime. Melly was on FaceTime. Melly like, y'all don't know, bro. Y'all don't know what Sack was doing to me. Y'all don't know, bro. Y'all don't know what Sack was doing to me, bro. Like saying it like Sack was some.
Following his 2023 mistrial and heading into his 2027 retrial, Melly's chances of ever seeing freedom again seem to be getting slimmer and slimmer. In September,
I seen it.
If you get hit by a truck, who you calling? If you get bit by a dog, who you calling? Only one.
People don't usually become double murderers overnight. The dark circumstances needed for something that serious to happen usually brew up over a long period of time. And before YNW Melly was a chart-topping rapper, allegedly sitting in the back seat of a car about to kill his two closest friends, he was just a kid named Jamel Demons, whose upbringing was far from normal. Melly didn't grow up in one of the many big cities and buzzing rap hubs of America like Atlanta, New York, or Los Angeles. He comes from a much more obscure place in the American South, a little-known place called Gifford, the poorest community in the entire state of Florida. It was here that Melly's mother, Jamie King, would eventually end up living after becoming pregnant with him at only 14 years old while living in Elyria, Ohio. His father being an artist named Dante the Gift Taylor.
His mama from Ohio? That's why I always thought she looked fine, bro. Like, for a mama. And she had him at 14. Also, she really kind of young. She a 90s baby. She a 90s baby, but that's my area. 90s baby. I ain't mess with you, you ain't a 90s baby. But that's why I always thought she looked pretty, man. That's crazy.
Taylor, who dated Melly's mother when they were both teenagers. But growing up, Melly lived all around the Treasure Coast, but it was in the poor Section 8 housing complex in Gifford called the Orangewood Park Apartments, where he would meet his childhood best friend and one of the eventual victims who he would be accused of murdering, YNW Juvie, aka Christopher Thomas Jr. Melly's childhood was far from easy, and these events arguably laid the groundwork for the shocking tragedy that would ultimately follow. His mother was not only extremely young, but also a single parent working 2 jobs, leaving her often little time to attend to a young Melly. And in a poverty-stricken community like Gifford, where the streets often raise kids faster than their parents can, the absence of real guidance would leave a lasting mark on him. When Melly was in the 4th grade, he would one day find a revolver at his crack-smoking uncle's place while playing around, a revolver that he would take with him and carry everywhere, including to school.
It was a .22 revolver, a real gun. I'm a kid though, so I just walk out the house and I shot the and I couldn't hear out my ear for like a week. Then I was like, damn, this is a real gun, you know what I'm saying? I was only in 4th grade, but I took that everywhere, to school. I took that everywhere.
According to Melly himself, ever since that moment, he would become addicted to guns.
I found my first gun when I was 9 years old. Ever since then, like growing up, I was so addicted to them. I loved them.
At some point, Melly's mother, Jamie, would find a new partner, Benny King Jr., the father of Melly's little brother.
That's definitely some psycho activity right there. I found my first gun at 9. You know, Dahmer started killing people at 9. Or animals or something. See what I'm saying? It starts real small, then it escalates to something big.
The YNW B-Slime, who has since become a popular rapper following in his brother's footsteps. Unfortunately, it seems that Benny and Melly didn't get along too well, and in the summer of 2011, Benny was arrested and charged with child for allegedly 12-year-old Melly up so badly he would end up in hospital. According to the warrant, Benny was punishing Melly due to allegations of him stealing an iPhone, which was indeed something that Melly had even admitted doing often during his youth, even seemingly openly selling these stolen phones straight from his Facebook page. However, according to Melly's biological father Dante, the real reason for the beatings were much darker. And in actuality, apparently Benny was really angry because of some drugs that Melly had apparently cleaned off the table into the trash without realizing.
My son, at like age 10, his job was to clean up the kitchen when he came home from school. And so he comes home from school, he does his chores. Well, there was a napkin of some sort laying on the counter, and it had some drugs in it. So basically, my son swept it off the counter into the trash because he didn't know what it was. Well, stepdaddy comes home, ranting and raving around the house, where's my stuff at? My son is like, I don't know what you're talking about. I cleaned up the kitchen. So stepdaddy finds his stuff in the trash can. So long story short, he put his hands on my son.
Whatever the case, a few years later, Melly's mother would also allege on Facebook that Benny had been violent with her. And while Melly had rarely talked about his parents in public, his Facebook posts give an image of a very dysfunctional family. It was after the violent incident with Benny that Melly moved to live with his grandmother. And according to Dante, the fact that Melly's mother Jamie seemingly chose her new husband over her own son deeply hurt Melly.
My son's mother, Jamie Dimmons, made the choice to send my son off to his grandmother's house. So when she sent him, you can imagine, okay, first of all, he was old enough to know you chose your husband that was in the wrong in the first place over me, is basically what he used to call me at age 10 and 11 and tell me like, mom chose her husband over me, like he was dead wrong. He should have never put his hands on me under them circumstances.
But unfortunately, Melly's troubles wouldn't end after moving in with his grandma, and around 7th grade, he would allegedly begin to sell drugs, and more concerningly, start bringing knives to school. Until one day, Melly would take out a knife and threaten to both himself and a girl, an incident that actually landed him in a mental institution.
I kept bringing knives to school and shit. I around and pulled one out on one of the motherfucking lunchroom.
So you pulled a knife out on someone at school?
Yeah, then I did some terrorist type. They're like, what the f?
Terrorist?
Yeah,
Oh.
I was crazy. I was crazy. I was about to my neck, it's her neck.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, then they just.
See, that's that Florida stuff, bro. That's that Florida stuff. Why everybody crazy be from Florida, bro? This nigga really crazy, bro. He did this shit.
Sent me to the crazy home, and I got right. They put me on.
How long were you in there?
7 days.
Clearly, Melly was beginning to display some pretty serious issues with his mental health, which can also be seen on his old Facebook posts. On social media and in interviews, Melly has also openly talked about having both bipolar disorder and ADHD, which he would receive several medications for over the years. Many years later, Melly would even begin openly rapping about his alleged multiple personalities, at times claiming to have as many as 6 personalities.
How many personalities do you have?
6.
6?
Yeah.
Back then, most listeners likely just brushed this off as a creative gimmick, nothing more than an edgy concept meant to set him apart, but with the benefit of hindsight, and in light of his serious mental health struggles growing up, these lyrics begin to feel far less symbolic, and much more likely an unsettling glimpse into the deep fractures in Melly's psyche that had formed beneath the surface. The two most well-known of his personalities, firstly being Melly, his default persona, always happy and loving, contrasted with Melvin, the total opposite. The sinister side of Jamel that apparently comes out when someone tries to take advantage of the goodness of Melly. Young Melly's problematic behavior would keep escalating, and in June 2015, he was seemingly arrested for drug possession, assault, and resisting arrest. Around this time, Melly would also increasingly begin to use gang slang in his Facebook posts relating particularly to the Blood Gang. More specifically, there were already indications that Melly had connections with a specific East Coast originated set of the Bloods, the Gangster Killer Bloods, also known as the G-Shine, who were active in places like the nearby Fort Pierce, just a 30-minute drive south from Gifford, where serious gang problems go back decades and where Melly had been going since a young age. Years later, it was this specific connection that would come back to haunt him during his murder trial.
So what you will learn from the evidence from the Instagram, from the private messages, was that Jamel Demons is a member of the G Shine Blood set. This is not a stage personality. This is not an actor that's playing a character. This was his real life.
Melly's street antics would eventually reach the next level. When at 16 years old, he would be arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. On Monday the 19th of October 2015, the police would be notified about a shooting near the Vero Beach High School, and after searching the area, the police would eventually find and arrest Melly, who was a student at the school, for allegedly firing his gun towards 3 other students. Later that night, YNW Portland would post a photo of Melly in jail with the caption, "Slick." The next day, after seemingly getting bailed out, Melly would post a link to a news article about the shooting on his Facebook with the simple caption, "Oh." Much later, footage would begin circulating online of
Mind of a maniac, Melly. Triple M in the building. Hey, Melly is crazy, gang. This nigga's wild. Wild boy.
Melly getting interrogated after that shooting. While in interviews, Melly would reveal that the situation actually stemmed from him retaliating against someone because they stole a gun from him.
So I thought the nigga had my gun, you know what I'm saying? I had brought it to school one day, then he told that I had that at school, and then he fought. I guess he had his homeboys follow me. And I guess when I went to the office to get searched, they came back, they doubled back and had the pistol. But I ain't never like pay attention to it because I was still trying to find out who the fuck had my shit till one day I found out they had me. And the next day I just went I had to bust at them boys for that.
But whatever the reason for the shooting, this would all point towards a dark culmination of all the neglect, abuse, and mental health problems that a young Melly had struggled with his entire childhood.
Hey, if y'all know who we shot at down in Vero Beach, can y'all get them in the comment section, bro? Just to confirm, to corroborate the story. This nigga already in jail for some old deep. They ain't gonna care, bro.
Showcasing that behind the usually smiley outer layer, another personality was hiding, one that Melly would seemingly call Melvin, and one that was not just fascinated with guns, but ready to use them at a moment's notice.
If you up that at it and bust his, that's his soul in it. Like, it's death in this motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? All I gotta do is up this motherfucker and yo, just he disappeared.
This incident would eventually land Melly in juvenile prison, but while there, he would come up with an idea that would forever change his life. The idea for his future hit song, Murder on My Mind. Besides his troubled childhood, the tragic events of October 2018 cannot be understood without talking about YNW Melly's artistic journey to becoming a world-famous rapper. Growing up, Melly had a passion for singing and performing from a very young age, and throughout his childhood, he would create different rap groups with his friends, first of these being called One Up.
We used to be One Up, but we had too many groupies. One Up, one last known for us.
Up formed around 2013, while the following year, Melly and his friends began to really promote their music, this time under the name Ghost Gang or the Ghost Bros, at the time already doing shows at local venues, as well as shooting vlogs where they captured their studio sessions and other daily activities.
Wow. Ghost Bros, Florida. I tried to see if I could find something. I can't find nothing, man. That's crazy.
Showing a tight-knit friend group formed around their passion for music.
9:55, and we are at Hungry Howie's. You know, Ghost Bros like peace of the night.
Casper, you know. Ghost gang or no gang.
Man, don't do that. Let it do the game. Can't be in Ghost gang till you get one.
That's what Cash working on right now.
Got my weed.
That ain't gonna get that mo.
It was the following year in 2015 when YNW, or Young N-Word World, would finally be born. But unlike the earlier groups, YNW was more than just a rap collective, it was also a street clique with numerous
That was alright though.
members that reflected the life that Melly and his friends had stepped into in the streets. However, when it came to music, there were always 5 key members of YNW, including of course Melly, whose natural ability to sing and harmonize his raps were always in a class of their own. Then there was the silent, smooth operator Cortland Henry, aka YNW Bortland, who would later also become Melly's alleged partner in crime. And then there would be their 2 alleged future victims, Christopher Thomas Jr., aka YNW Juvie, Melly's childhood best friend, who was well liked and respected in Gifford, repping a clique known as the 40th Ave Army gang, who were like a subset of the broader YNW crew, and Anthony Williams, aka YNW Sack Chaser, who was a few years older than the rest, tall and outspoken, and unlike the others, originally from a big city and a major rap hub, Atlanta. And then lastly, there was Jalen Green, aka Jay Green, who was perhaps the only one from the group who could truly match Melly's rapping and singing abilities. At the time, Melly was already showcasing his natural star power on a local level by being so-called Facebook famous in the Treasure Coast area, and particularly at his Vero Beach High School, where he interacted amongst the unusual mix of poor kids from Gifford and highly affluent kids from Vero Beach, which in complete contrast to Gifford is actually one of the wealthiest places in the entire state of Florida. Now, Melly would become the popular kid in the school, even creating his own trademarks that everyone would copy, like the so-called Melly pose. And while Melly would keep getting in trouble with the law, eventually getting sent to juvenile prison after his 2015 shooting case, his family and large friendship circle would do their best to keep his name alive by shouting out Free Melly on their social media and wearing custom Free Melly shirts, even organizing Free Melly parties with the rest of the YNW crew performing live. But meanwhile, Melly would keep evolving his sound behind bars, often singing and freestyling in his cell while beating on his chest for a rhythm.
Crazy. So what, you're pretty good at writing verses and stuff without even having a beat?
Not even write, I just beat on my chest, make it from scratch, and then like I find the perfect beat for it.
Once you get out? Damn, that's crazy.
The rawness of the approach would be a recipe for hits, and only a few days after being released in late 2016, Melly would drop a video on his Facebook of him singing the new song, 772 Love, dedicated to the Treasure Coast area code. In November, Melly would drop the real song on his SoundCloud, and it would soon go viral locally, even inspiring a challenge where fans would sing their own versions of the song. By this point, Melly was on fire in the streets, with hit after hit pouring out, including...
So he was really destined to be a star, gang. This is crazy. This dude was really destined to be a star, chat.
The song that would ultimately come to define his life, Murder on My Mind. According to Melly, the chorus first came to him while he was locked up, a moment he later described as tapping into his Melvin alter ego, shaping the song's disturbingly dark theme.
I really woke up in the jail cell and I like, wake up in the morning, I got murder on my mind. Like Melvin, my other person inside, Melvin, that mother, every day, all day. I think that's all you be thinking about. Some people think about it when they wake up. Some people think about shoes. Some people think about weird shit. They go with the murder on his mind. And I'm like, hey, bro, do you?
At the beginning of March 2017, the song would drop in its final form, and it seems that Melly was already sure that it would be a hit. But just when Melly's rise to the top was about to begin, he would get locked up again, this time for failing a drug test. Although according to Melly, the real reason was that people in charge of his probation had heard Murder on My Mind and found the song's lyrics so reprehensible that they wanted to send him to a youth academy program for 6 months. This could be part of the reason, but there was also a much more serious crime where Melly had allegedly played a critical role. The short version of the story is that on the 17th of February 2017, a few weeks before the release of Melly's hit song about having a murder on his mind, there was in fact a real homicide where an off-duty police officer would lose his life from a stray bullet during a shooting.
Tori, this is a very difficult morning for Deputy Chambliss's family and staff at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Chambliss's cousin tells me that Deputy Chambliss had been at a wake at a nearby church. He then walked across the street to this home to comfort family grieving a loved one when his life was cut short. The Indian River County Sheriff's Office says Deputy Chambliss was a 27-year veteran of the department and just 2.5 years shy of his retirement. He was a corrections deputy, his nickname Kool-Aid, known for his big smile. Investigators say it was around 9:30 last night when a suspect or suspects opened fire and shot Deputy
Melly
Chambliss in the chest.
I'ma say
he was
this.
rushed to Indian River County Medical Center, where he later died.
This altercation would take place at the wake of Jay Green's mother, who had recently passed away, and at the wake, an argument would allegedly begin between the YNW members and a man named Makil Chambliss. This argument, according to one witness, traced back to none other than YNW Melly robbing Chambliss a few weeks prior. But confusingly, one of the people on Chambliss's side of the beef would be Jacoby Mills, who would later be with Melly and the rest of the YNW crew during the night of the double murder of Juvie and Sack Chaser that took place the following year. This pointing to there likely being a lot happening behind the scenes within this broader friendship circle that we still don't fully understand to this day. But during the investigation, 3 YNW members, Jay Green, aka Jalen Green, YNW Bortland, aka Cortland Henry, and YNW Melly, as well as other people, were identified as possibly having something to do with the lethal shots that killed the off-duty officer. But in the end, Makil Chambliss was arrested in connection connection to the shooting, but not the homicide, and it seems that there would ultimately be no real closure in the homicide case. Although after Melly and Bortland would be arrested for the double murder of their friends Juvie and Sack Chaser, sources like Complex would report how they were both now being investigated as the main suspects in the homicide of that off-duty officer. While it seems that this case never developed into actual charges against Melly, his probation officer at the time was undoubtedly aware of his name being brought up in this case early on, which may have also affected the law enforcement's urge to get him off the streets. But while Melly would go back to being incarcerated, the suspiciously titled song he left behind, Murder on My Mind, would go viral, racking up millions of streams. In September of 2017, Melly's mother Jamie would find out that an artist had taken the beat from Melly's song called Legendary and was promoting it as his own. This artist would wind up being the Sniper Gang rapper and Kodak Black's brother, John Wicks. After getting over the initial anger, Jamie would actually get in touch with John Wicks, while also ending up meeting his manager, who would end up being none other than 100K Track, the infamous music manager who would also get involved in King Von's career before he passed away. Now, this random encounter started a partnership between Melly and Track, and with the help of Track's industry contacts and Melly's natural gift for creating catchy, melodic trap music, his career would soon blow through the roof. After he was released from jail in early 2018, Melly would go on to release numerous music videos that now have hundreds of millions of views, including Melly the Menace, Blue Balenciagas, Butter Pecan, Freddy Krueger, and of course the music video for Murder on My Mind, which now has over 700 million views. No doubt, partly due to the ominous meaning that the song would receive after the tragic events of 2018, as many seemingly thought the song had been made after the double murder when it hadn't. But Melly, together with his closest YNW entourage like Bortland, Juvie, and Sack Chaser, would begin to tour all over Florida and beyond, while also making trips to major rap hubs like Los Angeles, where Melly would do interviews with large hip.
I ain't gonna lie, Florida one of them states, bruh. If you get popping and rapping, that's an easy 100 bands, gang. Really an easy quarter ticket. It's so many different clubs, so many different cities, so many different spots where you go pick up 15,000, 10,000, 20,000. There's money flowing down there. It's crazy, bro.
Pop platforms like No Jumper, and New York, where he would reportedly sign a deal with the major label 300. In the lead up to the release of his debut mixtape I Am You in 2018, he was making a lot of noise, and at this point it was clear that Melly was a natural star, not just in his hometown, but also nationwide, and even globally. Hell, this is before YouTube even took off for me, and I was in the UK bumping Blue Balenciagas and trying to find out everything I could about Melly. But at the same time, everything leading up to Melly's rise to fame had seemingly been a group effort, where his friend circle, and particularly the core group of YNW, had put in some serious effort to make this dream come true. And unfortunately, the success also began to expose fractures within the YNW crew, driven particularly by one individual who felt his contributions to Melly's rise were being ignored. This ultimately created tensions that would escalate, allegedly drawing out the unresolved damage left by Melly's troubled childhood, bringing out his dark side once again, with tragic and fatal consequences. As Melly's rapid ascent to fame in 2018 reshaped the group's dynamics, fractures began to form within the YNW collective. Firstly, Melly would have a falling out with arguably the second most talented rapper in the crew, Jay Green, which would cause the old friend circle from Gifford to go through some turmoil. Jay Green later commented on the falling out in interviews such as Say Cheese, giving an answer that was both vague yet intriguing, saying that he chose to fall back because pride and egos were starting to cause problems, and that people didn't understand their position within the crew, while also adding that jealousy was becoming an issue without ever clarifying exactly who was jealous of who.
Oh yeah,
what was the falling out over?
It was just like, it was like pride and ego, you feel me? Like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, you feel me? It's like everybody want to be the star. Everybody didn't know their position. You feel me? Everybody want to play this other position. Yeah. It's like I don't have those type of attitudes towards, you feel me, that I say I love. If I call you my brother, you feel me? I don't got no jealousy or no hatred, no, you feel me? So when I see like that, I like to fall back.
Right.
So nigga might feel like I'm acting funny, whatever, but I'm just keeping it G, you feel me? I don't want to involve myself in that type of.
But what's Jay Green up to now? Jay Green. I don't know.
The beef between Jay Green and Melly would eventually be solved by the end of 2018, but what Jay Green had said about pride and egos within the crew had at that point already caused a much more serious beef, one that would eventually turn deadly. There are many rumors about what this beef was about, but they all have one person in common: YNW Sack Chaser, Melly's childhood friend and one of the key members of the YNW collective. While Melly was undoubtedly the face of YNW, it seems that Sack Chaser saw himself as the kingmaker behind the scenes, the one who had built the brand and put Melly on the path to global fame. On his social media, Sack Chaser would often highlight the motto, "Lead, never follow," which he had also apparently gotten tattooed on himself. These early signs showing that he wasn't somebody who was necessarily comfortable with simply playing the role of a supporting act. And according to the YNW affiliate Jacoby Mills, Sack Chaser was the one aggressively controlling the core group of YNW, including Melly, or as Mills put it, Sack had mind control over them, as he would later tell the police during his interrogation.
Sack is a crazy mother. Okay,
we've been hearing.
Sack is a crazy mother. Like, he is crazy. Like, he had mind control over all them. You know what I'm saying? Anything he say, they do. You know what I'm saying? So he had mind control of them.
However, as Melly's rise to fame began to accelerate, it appeared that things were slowly slipping out of Sack Chaser's control, as his desire to be seen as the group's leader and the reality of that leadership began to erode. This became increasingly apparent in July 2018 when he reposted a series of tweets from Future on his Facebook page, seemingly throwing subtle subliminal shade at Melly by implying that he had given him his style, from ad-libs to song titles to flows, and that he had been too humble for way too long. However, still, during Melly's No Jumper interview, released in August 2018, Melly would proudly show Adam22 that he had both Juvie and Sack Chaser's names tattooed on his face, a move that would leave Adam confused at the time, as these kinds of tributes are usually reserved for people who are already dead.
So what you got tattooed on your face? Tell me about it a little bit.
What? On my face?
Yeah. We got the heart on this side.
Alright.
What's that say above your eyebrow on that side?
Which side?
Oh, either one. What's it?
No, I got Sack Chaser right here. That's my brother. That's my twin.
Okay.
And I got Juvie.
Juvie?
Yeah, that's my brother.
Just a lot of your friends who passed?
Yeah. No, them right there.
Oh, okay.
Right there.
My bad. I wouldn't get none of my friends tattooed on my face until they died.
Yeah.
I'm not a good friend like you are, apparently.
For life.
Now, some conspiracy-minded fans have even theorized that this was yet another example of Melly being a real sociopath who had planned the murders of his two best friends long in advance and got them tatted ahead of the killings. But while this conspiracy might be taken there a bit far, what is clear is that even if it wasn't pre-planned, the trio clearly had a very deep bond.
Oh no, that was early on. What happened when it happened was like a little later on, like 2 years later. You know, if that nigga thought 2 years in advance, cold killer boy, I ain't gonna lie. Not gonna lie.
On to get each other's names tatted. But unfortunately, when money and fame stepped into the picture, it seemed that this deep bond turned into an even deeper resentment. According to Melly, in his track Versatile, released June 15th, 2018, there was already a war brewing over the copyright to the YNW name, as the song was released the very same month as Melly's own mother formally trademarked YNW. However, as depositions later revealed, a man named Cortez Ash, aka Rashad Ash, had already filed for a YNW LLC back in March 2018. And to make matters more complex, Ash had allegedly been in a relationship with Melly's mother, who was also the owner of a brand called Cash Motivated. And during his 2018 interview on No Jumper, Melly could even be seen sporting a Cash Motivated chain, a topic he clearly avoided discussing.
What's Cash Motivated, like it says on your chain?
I ain't trying to tell.
What, is some old that you're not necessarily a part of anymore?
I don't want to even talk about that.
Ah, interesting.
Ash had gotten involved with YNW early, but as Melly ultimately got together with 100K Track as his manager, it seems the relationship with Ash ultimately went sour, leading to a trademark dispute. This shows just how much was taking place behind the scenes, as different people were trying to jump on the money train that they saw the YNW brand becoming due to Melly's sudden success. And according to some sources, there were also clashes over the YNW brand's ownership that may have incidentally signed Juvie and Sack Chaser's death warrants. One of the people making these claims was Juvie's father, who later told publicly how there was an alleged $500,000 marketing and licensing deal on the table, which was set to give Melly and Sack.
What they was doing to Melly? I mean, I ain't. What you talking about, bro?
Chaser $200,000 each, while Juvie would get 100K.
I think the story about the $200,000 with Anthony was a true story because it's not reported, but Chris told me the same story, and also it was a $500,000 play, and Melly was going to get $200,000. Sack was going to get $200,000. Chris was going to get $100,000. And as I'm hearing it from Chris, they was going to sell the YNW brand. not a record deal or nothing like that. It was like for the brand itself. And by them being found in
How they was graping him, the friends he killed.
members, they was going to get a piece of the pie.
They were going to sell the YNW name for licensing or to sell products? Or what do you mean they were going to sell the name?
For marketing, licensing, stuff like that. I think they want to go up on the bigger umbrella just to push them, I think. Push the brand more global. That's what I'm thinking.
In addition, the YNW affiliate Jacoby Mills later alleged to police that Sack Chaser expected a separate $200,000 payment directly from Melly's label advance.
Sack texted his mama and said, I'm not going to see that money. At the end of the day, Sack, you weren't supposed to be getting the $200K. Yeah, Melly had $400K coming in, Sack kept saying he getting $200K. How you getting $200K? Your music don't even add up to what Melly. Your views is not the way Melly shit had to get no $200K. So basically saying you was finna rob Melly.
According to Jacoby, Sack Chaser was dead set on securing that $200K.
What's coming from? The little album he signed for the year. Signed for a year, but you don't get all your money up front. That broke down too. Because by the end of the year, if he'd have got it all up front, I think he would have $1 million, $2 million or something. You feel me? Like, if he didn't get all that up front. Then when Sack kept saying he getting that $200K, Melly $400K never came. That kept getting pushed back. Sack kept saying we all gonna eat, bro. We're gonna be straight. I'm just looking. Everybody else like, hell yeah. But I'm like me and my dog Toby looking at Sack like, how you getting $200K?
Chillingly, this was also corroborated by Sack Chaser's mother, who claimed that her son had called her hysterically only days before his death after realizing he was likely never going to see that $200,000. This struggle for control over the YNW brand's ownership and the group's hierarchy was also evident in text messages sent between Sack Chaser and Melly towards the end of August 2018. In these messages, Sack Chaser clearly positioned himself as the leader and aggressively pressured Melly to respect this established hierarchy, emphasizing how
Oh yeah, and I meant to tell you, I told you before we went to Cali that me and you will be CEO. Hey, so that's the artist, cause you be moving on this music just cause you first pop. Ain't finna be looking confused all my life. Y'all really my artist. You ain't do that part right. I got these right. You ain't finna just keep saying that y'all be on some lifestyle. Just can't say that your artist just to look good, to do the same I've been doing. I'm just under you cause I let you be the face, but I'm CEO.
he and Juvie were the CEOs of YNW, while Melly was merely the face. He would also accuse Melly of sabotaging his character by making it seem like Melly was a self-made star, while according to Sack Chaser, he had given numerous artists to Melly in order to make YNW a real label, and that Melly was nothing without his influence and ideas. With Sack even taking full credit for Melly's musical evolution, claiming that he was the one who came up with Melly's signature melodic sound, saying how Melly had been rapping like Wiz Khalifa before his influence. At the time, it seemed that Melly, who confusingly texted under the username Young Sack Chaser Howard, still had a lot of love for Sack Chaser, or at least that's how he would make it seem, confirming Sack Chaser and Juvie's role as CEOs while thanking Sack Chaser for getting him artists. Melly also claimed he was simply waiting for money to arrive so that he could get everybody right, while hinting at crazy plans that the group wouldn't understand until the funds were secured. But interestingly, Melly wasn't the only one that Sack Chaser was beefing with, as there were also numerous pieces of evidence showing that he was clashing heavily with Melly's mother, Jamie. Most famously, after the murders of Sack Chaser and Juvie, old social media posts would begin to circulate showing Jamie dissing Sack Chaser. One of these being an apparent Instagram story where Jamie had taken a screenshot of Sack Chaser's post on Facebook, where he would once again publicly throw shade at Melly and imply that he was the true mastermind behind the operation, while also throwing shade at Jamie, saying how he was going to turn her lil son to a king, to which Jamie would respond by calling Sack Chaser really dumb, while saying that Sack was actually broke and got everything he had from Melly, before adding that if Sack Chaser would ever try anything again, she was going to let that Draco go and shoot him. This post implying that the two had already clashed badly in real life. Another piece of evidence was a video clip of Jamie again talking about Sack and their beef, going on a rant about how Sack Chaser was a fake gangster and that Melly was actually successful because of his mother, not because of Sack, before ending by implying that there had indeed been an incident where Sack Chaser had threatened her.
Melly was successful because of Melly.
with a gun, but she wasn't bothered because she was a real gangster and had bigger guns.
Show me text messages from Sack Chaser threatening all her friends and all these people like he's about this life. But I'm saying, like, who the f you ever robbed? Who the f you ever shot at? What the f you ever did? You couldn't even take a weed charge. If you don't sit down and don't ever come for me, because my credentials is real. It ain't even a joke. So don't ever try to come for me, because I don't even play them type of games.
Right.
Like, what you got that I ain't got? Oh, you threaten me with your little gun? I got big guns. At the end of the day, Melly is my child. And he is gonna be great because he's talented. He's talented because his mom, not because of your flow.
Text messages presented during Melly's first trial would provide more evidence of this beef, mostly through text exchanges between Melly and Sack Chaser, where Sack Chaser would tell Melly how his mom was bad-mouthing him to everyone, and how he was going to expose Jamie soon, with Melly surprisingly taking Sack Chaser's side in these exchanges, even participating in dissing his own mother, saying some truly wild stuff, like how he didn't even consider her his mother anymore.
I look past that. Melly was playing mind games. Hey, look. And the nigga talk crazy to my mama, just for sure, I'm gonna check you, gang.
Or calling her the devil before saying how he didn't even care if they, meaning Sack Chaser and some others, would kill her because she wasn't his mother anymore and had sold her soul. However, the first trial, interestingly, never showed Melly arguing directly with his mother, the way his messages with Sack Chaser seemed to suggest he was. There is some chance that Melly was never actually beefing with his own mom, at least nowhere near to the extent that he wanted Sack Chaser to think. Rather, these messages might have actually been examples of Melly trying to simply play along with Sack Chaser in order to appease the tension or even manipulate him. But whatever the case, it seems that the tension between Melly and Sack Chaser kept escalating in the months leading up to the murder. And at the end of August 2018, there would be an ominous exchange between the two, where Sack Chaser would imply that he felt that Melly was up to something, to which Melly would respond with a long message expressing his frustration, saying how he was done with everything and that Sack Chaser and the others could keep the house where they were all living, and that he was going to eventually pay Sack Chaser for everything he had done for him in his career, before adding that he didn't want to live in the same house with someone who was constantly thinking he was going to betray them, even telling Sack Chaser that he would never hurt him. Melly would then end the message by saying that he just needed some time alone, adding that he would never beef with his day ones, and that he and Sack Chaser were so close that they were basically one person, and that if Sack died, Melly would die too. Sack Chaser would then respond by saying how something was just telling him that Melly was plotting something behind his back, before once again referencing Melly's mother Jamie, seemingly implying that if the roles were reversed, he would never let his mother disrespect Melly like Jamie had disrespected him. Sack Chaser would then send a follow-up message stating that while he wasn't beefing with Melly, everybody would die before he would let something happen to him or his family. Chillingly, these exchanges seem to align with several claims made by their friend Jacoby Mills, who told police that Sack Chaser straight up told Melly that if they try anything with him, he's going to get them all killed.
Sack was telling Melly, like, if y'all trying to slime me, I get all y'all killed.
Jacoby also told that Sack Chaser had forced his family to relocate because he had believed that they were targeted by someone allegedly tied to Melly.
So I ain't trying to put my people in no danger, you feel me, but...
Do you think they'll hurt your family?
Yeah, you damn right. They're finna kill Sack family. Till Sack told them to move. Now they don't know where he stay at, where they stay at.
The following month, things would get increasingly hostile as Sack Chaser gave Melly what seemed like a final warning, claiming that he could completely mess up the lives of Melly and everyone else forever and that everything was in his hands. Then, only some days before that fateful night, Melly and Sack Chaser would allegedly get into a physical altercation, during which the much bigger Sack Chaser would allegedly beat up Melly in front of his girlfriend, as told by the father of YNW Juvie in his interview with the Law and Crime Network.
Was there any sign of bad blood before your son's life was taken and before Anthony was killed? Or was there any tension there that you knew of?
Not with Juvie, not with Chris, but you know, you heard things about him and Anthony getting into like altercations about disputes about money over certain situations, and they got in a fight prior to that, and they said, like, you know the story that they say Sack beat him up and knocked his goals out in front of his girlfriend, and like 2 days later, I think that's when the incident happened.
Moreover, during an interview between the mother of Melly's ex-girlfriend, she would claim that Sack Chaser had sent intimate pictures of himself to the girlfriend, while the girlfriend herself would reveal to the police that she had literally stopped hanging out with Melly and his friends because the tension between Melly and Sack Chaser was becoming too intense. There were also other, even more disturbing allegations about Sack Chaser, the most explosive one being that he was actually Melly.
Word is that YNW Melly was being by YNW Sack Chaser for a long time.
Gang, if this true, I see why. I ain't gonna lie. I am not gonna lie. I see why.
For a long time. Not YNW Juvie. Not him.
During his interrogation, Jacoby Mills described a FaceTime call that led him to believe that Sack Chaser may have actually been Melly.
What motive would Melly have to kill his two friends?
They just piss him off? I don't know, bro. I ain't gonna lie, bro. I'm gonna tell y'all straight up. Man, Melly was on FaceTime. Melly like, y'all don't know, bro. Y'all don't know what Sack was doing to me. Y'all don't know, bro. Y'all don't know what Sack was doing to me, bro. Like, saying it like Sack was. So I'm like, what you saying, bro? What you saying? Like, what Sack was doing to you? Say it. And he don't never say it. Like, he just kept saying, y'all don't know what Sack was doing to me.
Do you think Sack was him?
I don't know, bro. That's why I'm saying I don't know what Sack, bro. Like,
an adult.
I don't know, but like Sack bigger than Melly. What you think Melly about this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Sack about.
At face value, this claim seems extremely far-fetched, but it could also reflect a partial reality, possibly representing Melly's attempts to explain to those around him the psychological and perhaps even a physical abuse that Sack Chaser may have directed towards him. This was also coupled with rumors that Sack Chaser was and having relations with Bortland and Juvie's little sister Chloe, who was reportedly only years old at the time. If true, this could help explain Bortland's alleged motive for assisting Melly in the murders, but at the same time, it complicates the narrative, because it offers little explanation for the killing of Juvie, who under this theory would have shared the same incentive to remove Sack Chaser from the picture, although according to some people, this could have been to Juvie allegedly turning a blind eye to what Sack was doing. But overall, unlike with Sack Chaser, the motive for Juvie's murder has always been a mystery, one of the only theories being that Juvie was simply collateral damage, who was taken out because he wasn't willing to go along with the murder of Sack Chaser. Many have argued that Juvie had to be killed out of fear that he would eventually cooperate with law enforcement, but one of the more compelling alternative theories suggests that Melly and Bortland feared Juvie not because he might talk to the police, but because of the respect that he commanded in Gifford and the influence he carried through his ties in the streets with cliques like the 40th Ave Army Gang. That possibility gains additional weight from what followed, as retaliation would indeed erupt in the streets of Gifford after the murders, violence that, as we'll later explore, appeared to be driven specifically by those closest to the YNW Juvie. In the end though, this is all just speculation, but what does seem supported by the facts is that behind the scenes, the conflict between Melly and Sack Chaser was reaching a breaking point, which would allegedly finally come to its tragic culmination in October 2018. By the fall of 2018, the close-knit friend group that had once fueled YNW's rise to fame was irreparably fractured, and what had begun as a brotherhood had quietly decayed into a situation where it was no longer a question of if something would happen, but when. In late October, back in their home state of Florida, the YNW crew headed to a recording studio in Fort Lauderdale called New Era. Allegedly, the tension was also present that very night, and during the later police investigation, Melly's ex, Felicia Holmes, claimed that she had overheard that either Sack Chaser or Juvie had actually dissed Melly in a rap during their studio session. Later that night, in the early morning hours of October the 26th, at around 3:20 AM, they left the studio with two cars, a grey Jeep SUV and a red Mitsubishi SUV, this moment being captured by the studio's security cameras, which showed how the grey Jeep had Bortland in the driver's seat and Sack Chaser next to him, Juvie in the back behind him, and Melly in the left rear seat behind Bortland. In hindsight, that positioning feels both symbolic and strategic, with the alleged aggressors on one side, Bortland having control over the vehicle, while Melly being tucked in the back seat with direct aim on both of their alleged victims. While Sackchaser and Juvie were on the opposite side, Sackchaser sitting in the front, still projecting authority and unaware of what was about to unfold. Meanwhile, the red Mitsubishi was packed with their childhood friends and YNW affiliates, including Dontavius Withers, aka YNW Taliban, Adrian Davis, aka YNW Big Bank or AD, and Jacoby Mills, aka YNW Bobby, and Trevion Glass, aka YNW Fetty. Interestingly, Jacoby Mills would later tell police how he was about to enter the grey Jeep instead, but something or someone had stopped him, according to Jacoby, that being God himself.
I'm gonna tell you some crazy. I tried to go get in a car with what's the name of them, because Juvie had to go back inside and get some weapons and whatever. So I tried to go get in that car, but when I tried to grab the door, I got pushed back to the red car, but nobody was there.
Who pushed you back to the red car?
Nobody. This God. I'm letting you know now, this is God. I did it a second time to make sure I wasn't tripping. So I tried to do it again. That put me back over there to the red car.
However, as Jacoby himself would later tell investigators, he's a blood cousin of Bortlen, which paints this rather wild explanation in a different light, as Jacoby would later clearly try and steer blame away from his cousin. In that context, the claim that God pushed him away could also potentially serve as a cover for the possibility that Bortlen had instructed him to get into a different car, a detail that, if true, suggests some kind of premeditation.
You don't think Cortland did it, do you? I don't know. I'm gonna tell you straight up. To me, Cortland ain't living like that. That's my blood cousin. Cortland is my blood cousin. Auntie Fina, all that, y'all, blood cousin, like, Bortlen not living like that.
After leaving the studio, the two-car convoy headed to the nearby city of Miramar, where they had been living together in the Sunset Lakes gated community. At around 3:50 a.m., the red Mitsubishi arrived at the crossing of Miramar Parkway and at 184th Avenue and turned south to enter the Sunset Lakes community. However, the grey Jeep continued towards north, reaching Pines Boulevard and turning west, then turning south on US 27, until reaching the far west of Pembroke Road, a small and secluded stretch of road without streetlights. What unfolded next, and how the group ultimately arrived at this remote location, is still unknown. One widely discussed theory, however, is that Sackchaser and Juvie may have been asleep, leaving Melly and Bortlen with the time and control needed to steer the vehicle somewhere they believe no one would see them. There, about 900 feet or a few hundred meters off US 27 highway, Sackchaser and Juvie were allegedly shot and killed, and afterwards the car, including the dead bodies inside the car, was shot several more times from the outside, before Bortlen and Melly drove with the dead bodies back towards where they came from, until Melly would allegedly exit the vehicle and make one of his greatest mistakes, placing a FaceTime call to his at-the-time girlfriend Mariah Hamilton, who was in the presence of her mother Felicia Holmes. During that call, Melly would allegedly tell how he had been the victim of a drive-by shooting and how Sackchaser and Juvie were dead. Afterwards, Melly would contact his friend, the rapper Fredo Bang, dropping him a pin of where to pick him up. Meanwhile, Bortlen would arrive at the hospital around 3:35 a.m, alerting the medical staff and a police officer that there were gunshot victims in his vehicle. Bortlen was then later questioned by the police, who he told that he had driven from the studio towards the Sunset Lakes when a car pulled up next to them and begun shooting. Bortlen would take the police to the alleged crime scene, but despite the police canvassing several miles of the road, there was zero evidence that any shooting had taken place, nor were there any reports of gunshots coming from the area. This was only the beginning of Bortlen's story beginning to fall apart like a house of cards. The police eventually got their hands on the security footage from the studio, figuring out that there was a missing passenger that Bortlen had conveniently left out of his story, this of course being Melly. Melly's alleged phone would also corroborate his movements, not only showing that he had traveled in the car driven by Bortlen, but that the car had traveled to the actual location of the shooting at Pembroke Road, where the police would end up finding numerous shell casings that matched the bullet holes caused by the supposed drive-by, as well as two different types of glass that matched the windows of the vehicle. But that wasn't the worst part, because when the investigators took a closer look at the car itself, they quickly came to the conclusion that this had not been a drive-by at all. And the most damning of all, police would find a single shell casing inside the vehicle, something that would be only possible if the shots had been fired from inside the car. Even worse for Melly, that casing was found on the left rear passenger side, the exact seat that he had been occupying according to the studio's security camera footage, and the same position from which the fatal shots were fired according to forensic evidence. And these pieces of evidence were just the tip of the iceberg, as there were also numerous pretty damning pieces of digital evidence, like Melly allegedly telling how he did that to to another rapper only hours after the murders, or how he told his girlfriend how Bortlen was coming everywhere with him because if the cops came to get him, it would be his fault. It's not exactly clear how much Melly was aware of the investigation going on behind the scenes, but publicly he would continue his life as if almost nothing had happened, enjoying every moment of the fame that only grew stronger as a result of the media attention following that tragic night. Right after the murders, he would pay his respects to his dead friends with numerous tribute posts. But interestingly, already the very same day that Juvie and Sackchaser passed away, Melly would also be back in grind mode, shooting a music video with another Florida rapper, Burger, titled Nightmares at the Bottom, which would eventually be released about a month after the double murder. In December, Melly would also put out a short documentary about his life on YouTube, which would highlight a major problem that he had allegedly created for himself due to his actions on the night of the murders. This being the two separate realities that Melly was trying to establish. One being the version that Bortlen had told the police, where Melly had never even been in the car when the murders happened, while the second being the one that he started with the FaceTime call to his girlfriend on the night of the murders, and which he was likely telling all his friends, where he had actually been there and survived an attempt on his life. This version of the story being on full display in the documentary, which would end with an eerie statement saying how 4 days after the completion of this film, YNW Melly and his friends were the targets of a drive-by shooting in Miami, Florida, and YNW Juvie and Sackchaser were killed. The problem with these two narratives would eventually become
that nigga trying to cover something up, boy. Boy, that nigga
one of
trying
the
to
key
cover it
issues
up.
in the courtroom. But in the meantime, Melly's career trajectory would completely explode coming into 2019 as he released his second mixtape, We All Shine, a rather obvious nod to his alleged gang, G-Shine, reinforcing the impression that he was moving forward without hesitation, seemingly unconcerned by any possible scrutiny building behind the scenes. The album itself included the song Mixed Personalities, featuring none other than superstar rapper Kanye West, this song becoming Melly's true breakthrough hit to the mainstream. However, the party wouldn't last long, because already on the 13th of February, Melly together with Bortlen would be charged with first-degree murders of Juvie and Sackchaser, with the Miramar police coming out with a confident press release on Twitter saying how the duo had staged the drive-by, while Melly would post a message to his fans on Instagram stating his innocence before turning himself in. At their home turf in Gifford, where the news had undoubtedly caused some major turmoil, the response would seemingly come the following year when Bortlen's dad was shot several times, landing him in critical condition. A suspect was soon arrested, turning out to be 18-year-old Travion Banks, a childhood friend of YNW Juvie, who had actually made music under the name YNW AG Trill, AG standing for the 40th Ave Army Gang that Juvie repped even before YNW. And the local news would report how the police had considered the shooting to be a retaliation for the murders of Juvie and Sackchaser. Meanwhile, on social media, Juvie's other childhood friend, YNW Doo-Wop, would soon make an ominous statement that if Melly was out, he would have been next on the chopping block. But while street justice came relatively quickly, as we know now, the arrests of Melly and Bortlen would start one of the most infamous legal cases in rap history, and one that's still ongoing 7 years later, and one where, despite all the evidence we've explored, the odds of Melly avoiding a conviction remain disturbingly high.
Man, chat. I'm gonna tell y'all right now, bro, the most creative people is the most craziest people, bro.
After the double murder and the investigation that followed, the question remained, was YNW Melly responsible for the calculated and cold-blooded killing of his closest friends, or was this, as Melly's legal team continued to claim following the narrative established by Bortlen, that was just the result of a tragic drive-by shooting? For 4 years, Melly remained in legal limbo, waiting for his day in court, until finally in June 2023, that day arrived. But that trial turned out to be a legal spectacle that ultimately failed to produce a definitive outcome, ending in a mistrial on July the 22nd.
We are still unable to reach a unanimous decision. So at this time, what I am going to do is just declare a mistrial.
After 19 days of testimony and over 14 hours of deliberation spread across 3 days, the 12-member jury remained hopelessly deadlocked, with 3 jurors reportedly refusing to find Melly guilty on the charges of manslaughter. The most sensational detail of the mistrial came out afterwards, when one juror claimed publicly that the deadlock was driven by one disruptive juror, who eventually persuaded 2 others to come to her side. But even without the influence of one alleged rogue juror, what's noteworthy is that the jury seemingly unanimously found that there was no no evidence beyond reasonable doubt to convict Melly of first-degree murders, the actual charges that the prosecution were aiming for. And despite forensic experts testifying that the fatal shots came from inside the car, directly contradicting the drive-by shooting narrative, and phone data placing Melly's alleged phone inside the vehicle at the time of the murders, the case remained deeply divided, and the prosecution and police overall would receive a barrage of criticism on how the investigation was handled.
Florida judge sided with Melly's defense team and pulled lead prosecutor Christine Bradley off the case. It's a huge win for the rapper's defense, who claimed Bradley allegedly covered up a report that the investigation's lead detective had asked a Broward County Sheriff's deputy to lie about being present while serving a search warrant.
Detective Moretti said to Deputy Morell, "You need to say you were here when I served that search warrant." And it was kind of like an awkward moment. Someone described it just kind of getting punched twice in the head. So there's a search warrant that gets served, and I'm like, what's going on? And then the next thing, he's asking this deputy to lie for him.
This is a fundamental fairness thing. You have evidence, you need to turn it over to him. If you didn't turn it over to him, you can't use it. That's really the basic.
I don't think the prosecution is being effective at all. She's not connecting the dots. She's just reading a bunch of emails and a bunch of texts, and I think the jury is going to have a very difficult time tying that all back to Melly.
The actual evidence of someone saying, hey, he was the guy who pulled the trigger, he was the guy who was in the car, here's the DNA, here's the gunshot residue, that's all missing.
This looks a little incompetent. Miramar Police seems to have botched this investigation, and they call the Broward Sheriff's Office and ask them to come and look at the investigation upon which this entire prosecution rests. And he looks at it, and he says he instantly knew he had to.
Hold on, Tabby, go to the restroom.
Start from scratch. I think his words were, "It was the worst thing I had seen in my life."
And decisions ending after 3 days, with the jury not able to come up with a unanimous decision to decide the fate of YNW Melly.
I am going to just declare mistrial.
Moreover, the heavy focus on Melly's alleged gang affiliation, which the prosecution was seemingly trying to use to show premeditation in order to justify the first-degree murder charges, was also seen by many experts as simply a flawed strategy.
They're just talking about taking oaths. They're talking about what happens within the gang and with the G-Shine, which is the subset of the Bloods, but nothing really has been established as far as that crime is concerned. And last thing I'll mention is they're talking about dates before and after the crime, so nothing's really been established thus far in my mind.
One of the defense's most critical psychological wins was arguably involving the state's gang expert, Detective Danny Polo, who begun his testimony by wearing a full ski mask, arguably for his own safety, which many considered to be terrible optics.
Always said, if you have to be masked, get somebody else to do it. I think wearing a mask just taints the entire case. It immediately puts the jurors, it gives them anxiety.
Things would get even worse when, during cross-examination, it was revealed that Polo's face was easily found on public internet searches and, unfortunately, on his wife's Cash App profile, with the judge eventually forcing Polo to remove his mask in the court.
I'm going to show you what this is a picture of a mask. That is you and your family.
Yes, sir.
And that's on your wife's Cash App.
Yes, sir.
I think it also backfired because now he has to go without a mask. So it seems that from the state side or the prosecution side, maybe they were masquerading, great word, initially, and they were trying to draw more drama and point a spotlight on the defendant unnecessarily.
The defense also succeeded in creating reasonable doubt on multiple fronts, like highlighting the crucial fact that the murder weapon was never found and no eyewitnesses placed the gun in Melly's hand. And not only was the gun never found, but the same seems to apply also for the clothes that Melly was allegedly wearing during the murders, which undoubtedly would have had blood on them, just like Bortland had on his t-shirt, which he tried to cover with a hoodie. There's also another matter that's rarely brought up, but if Melly did indeed receive a ride from Fredo Bang after the murders, why was Fredo's car seemingly never searched for blood, as there would almost certainly have been traces on it, unless Melly literally changed his clothes before stepping into the car. Perhaps this was done and nothing was found, but given the police didn't apparently get a warrant to search for bloodstains inside Melly's house, this seems unlikely.
Of the Jeep, all bloody, blood all over the place. And we learned that you could spray and determine if there was blood right here on the carpet, even though you don't see it. Why in the heck don't you get a search warrant for the house? Why in the heck don't you? Don't tell us. We didn't know where he lived.
Crucially for the defense, one witness, Adrian Davis, also provided an alternative timeline, testifying that Melly had actually left the Jeep before the shooting.
Did there come a time that you were woken up before you got to the house?
Yes.
What happened?
We pulled over, and that's when Melly got in the car with us.
But now, as Melly heads into his 2027 retrial, many things have changed. After the first trial, allegations of withholding evidence ultimately led to the removal of the lead prosecutor, Christine Bradley, from the case.
Moretti, Deputy Moretti, who's one of the investigators in this case, executed a search warrant on Jamel Demon's mother's phone, Jamie King's phone, Jamel Demon's mother. There was an issue with that whole interaction. She came into the police station, they tried to grab it from her. He executed a search warrant. After it was done, another deputy comes in and he says, just say you were here or something to that effect, that you were in the room when this happened, which didn't happen. And another lawyer walked out because she's like, I'm not going to be part of this. And so that was never turned over to the defense.
And later, in August 2025, Melly would request to change his entire legal team due to the prosecution entangling one of his representatives at Raven Liberty into the criminal investigations around him. This may have backfired on the prosecution in a major way though, because as a replacement, Melly retained Drew Findling, the famed billion-dollar lawyer whose involvement will likely change the legal landscape around the case significantly. Findling, who has famously even represented the current president of America, Donald Trump, is a specialist in navigating the intersection of rap culture and the criminal justice system. He would represent Waka Flocka in a case where a firearm was discovered in his luggage during an airport security check, with him securing a not guilty verdict by successfully arguing that the rapper had accidentally taken his wife's bag to the airport. And while representing Cardi B in her widely publicized strip club brawl, in which she was accused of assaulting two women who had allegedly been intimate with her partner, Offset, with Drew Findling negotiating a sweetheart plea deal that ultimately resulted in just 15 days of community service. But perhaps most notably, with regards to Melly's case, Findling also represented Stephen McAllister, a man who was accused alongside a co-defendant of a robbery homicide. The state had a video of the crime, but without key witness testimony that they failed to secure, they could not definitively prove who was behind the mask or who fired the fatal shot, and that trial ended in an acquittal too. And most recently, Drew Findling was famously retained by none other than rap superstar Lil Durk to represent him in his federal murder for hire case. And while even
safe to say, if we ever get into any type of trouble, Drew Findling
might not be able to save Durk from his federal nightmare, defending Melly in a state murder case is a completely different reality altogether. In September 2025, Melly's alleged accomplice YNW Bortland, aka Cortland Henry, took a plea deal, avoiding the murder charges but pleading no contest to the lesser accessory after the fact charges, meaning that he wouldn't admit guilt to anything but also decided not to fight the charges, receiving 10 years in prison minus 1,340 days, or about 3 years and 8 months that he'd already served in jail, plus 6 years probation. It seems that even the judge in the case was surprised by how favorable the deal was, given that Bortlen was originally facing multiple life sentences. However, for most people, the reason seemed obvious. Bortlen was let off the hook so he would flip and ensure that Melly would be found guilty during the retrial, as even Melly's former lawyer Bradford Cohen would announce publicly soon after the news broke.
A lot of times where guys are in the prison for 4 or 5 years awaiting trial and looking at a life sentence, and they're offered 10 years where they'll be home probably in another 3 years that he'll serve, he decides to flip and become a cheese eater. It is an individual's decision whether or not to become Chuck E. Cheese, and in this case he has become Chuck E. Cheese. Is Chuck E. Cheese a mouse or a rat? I'm not sure. But long story short is he will be flipping, and it's going to make the case against YNW Melly a lot more difficult to win.
These claims were based particularly on the part of his plea agreement where he promised to provide a sworn statement to the prosecution in order to, quote, explain his role. According to attorney John Phillips, who represents YNW Juvie's family in a civil lawsuit against Melly, Bortlen, and several others, it's likely that Bortlen will be called to testify during Melly's retrial, and if subpoenaed, Bortlen would no longer be able to invoke his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. That means if he were asked direct questions, such as whether Melly was present during the murders, Phillips believes Bortlen would likely confirm the prosecution's version of events. As lawyer and YouTuber Bruce Rivers would comment on his channel, if that happens, Melly is indeed completely cooked.
Theoretically, Phillips said, Bortlen could now be called as a witness in Melly's upcoming trial. He could testify for Melly or against Melly. But my guess is if he's agreeing to do a proffer, he's going to snitch. I expect that to be the case, Phillips said. If they subpoena him, he can no longer take the Fifth Amendment on these issues. A judge can't compel him to testify now because double jeopardy's attached. Just ask, did Mr. Demons, that's Melly, ever leave that car? Was he sitting behind you at the time of the shootings? A jury's going to watch him squirm, and I think he's going to say, yes, Mr. Demons was there, or Demons, whatever. And that's the missing piece. So right now they have all this circumstantial evidence, and that's one of the reasons that he got a hung jury. With this, Melly's goose is kind of cooked.
Now, I'm not a legal expert, and I would never claim to know more about the law than someone like Bruce Rivers, but I would just like to point out that it wasn't that long ago when another very high-profile murder case rested on the shoulders of a star witness who couldn't plead the fifth due to his deal with the prosecution, and all I'm saying is that didn't turn out too well for the prosecution in the end. This is because, as the attorney Phillips himself would admit, now that Bortlen has been sentenced, there's little leverage that the prosecution has left against him. Bortlen's own lawyer would also give a statement after the plea deal saying that he doesn't represent snitches and that Bortlen would not be cooperating or testifying in Melly's trial, adding to that saying anyone who claims differently has not seen the plea deal and has no idea what they're talking about. It seems there's very little, if any, incentive for Bortlen to testify against Melly, and a whole lot of incentive for him to not testify, given particularly that he will be out in the not so distant future, with the opportunity to continue his rap career, which could be worth hundreds of thousands if not more with the right music and marketing team behind him. And while someone like Gunna's career took very little blowback from him allegedly cooperating with authorities in a roundabout way, Bortlen could very likely kiss his comeback goodbye if he actually did testify against Melly. The same sentiment was also shared by criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson-Ferrer when interviewed by the Law and Crime Network after the plea hearing.
As far as I'm understanding it to be, is that through this proffer agreement, of course, the prosecution wants him to cooperate, but there's no negative sanction for him if he does not. There's not a positive that he will receive if he provides certain information, and there's not a negative that he would receive if he doesn't cooperate or if he doesn't give any additional information. I think considering the possible lifestyle that he lives, and of course we're in a no snitching environment with certain demographics, that he probably will not say much, if anything at all.
But rather than making a witness out of Bortlen, the real reason why the prosecution decided to give him the plea deal may be because they didn't want to show their hand to Melly's defense before the retrial, given that their arguments against both Bortlen and Melly would have likely been very similar. This sentiment was seemingly shared by one of Bortlen's lawyers, who would give a further explanation to 1090 Jake about Bortlen's plans of not cooperating, saying how neither side wanted the case to go to court before Melly's case.
To be clear, his plea, his proffer, and anything surrounding it will have absolutely no impact on Melly's trial. I want to add just a little bit more background to what's happened over the past couple weeks. Neither defense nor the state wanted this case to go to trial this month. We believe that our case should be stayed until after Melly's appeals are resolved and his case is ready for trial. as our anticipation was that Melly's case would be tried before Bortland's. However, the judge denied our request for a continuance and denied our request to stay Bortland's case pending Melly's appeals. So we were moving forward to trial.
Besides the fact that the prosecution likely won't have a new star witness at Melly's trial, they would also receive some bad news in October 2025, when the appeals court would agree that the previous judge in the case did not abuse his discretion when he limited the digital evidence admitted into retrial to the day of and following the murders, which meant that the prosecution had to throw away weeks of digital evidence obtained from their overly broad warrant. So now, coming into 2026, Melly's new legal team, Drew Findling, and co-counsel Carrie Horwath would arguably receive more good news. For nearly 2 years, the state held a witness tampering charge over Melly's head, alleging that he had used jail communications to prevent his ex-girlfriend Mariah Hamilton from testifying.
Portland Henry. According to court documents, Melly, who does not get phone privileges while in custody, recruited another inmate named Terrence Mathis to help him talk to Henry. They also say Henry, who is on house arrest waiting for his own murder trial, allegedly delivered messages for Melly more than 100 times in the last year. Investigators say Demmons would write notes and have them passed to Mathis, who would then call Henry and pass along Melly's instructions. During one of those calls, a detective heard Mathis giving directions to Henry to keep Rihanna away from court, and said Henry was clearly uncomfortable with getting those directions on a recorded call. Rihanna, investigators say, is a code name for Melly's former girlfriend, Mariah Hamilton, who has not been cooperative with the state's investigation so far.
But finally, on the very eve of jury selection for that trial, prosecutors effectively dropped all charges related to the witness tampering.
State attorneys confirming the witness tampering charges dropped against the rapper. Before that announcement, the jury selection was expected to take place tomorrow.
Drew Findling would comment on the decision, characterizing it as an admission that no crimes had occurred, despite Melly being held for 652 days on those specific allegations. The prosecution would strike back with a statement where they seemed to imply that the actual reason was so that the evidence from the witness tampering trial could be used against Melly during the murder trial to establish his consciousness of guilt. But in reality, it's likely that the prosecution never wanted to go through with the witness tampering case in the middle of their murder prosecution, and that this was all just a bluff until the very end, which Melly's defense would call out, forcing the prosecutors to ultimately fold, as argued by a Florida criminal defense attorney, Lisa Figueroa.
I didn't expect the tampering case to go to trial. It's just not common for them to really be pursuing a tampering case when they have an active murder case, especially that is high profile and everyone's watching it. You risk putting this whole case and all the case facts out in front of potential jurors before the other trial comes forward. So they have to decide. It's a strategic game of chicken, really, and the defense held the line and ultimately the state folded.
However, one key factor that's very important for the defense was seemingly confirmed during the witness tampering case, this being the fact that Melly's ex-girlfriend Mariah Hamilton, who was doing everything to evade the prosecution during the first trial, is still not cooperating, as she was once again labeled by the prosecution as a hostile witness, this seemingly also playing a key part for why the prosecution decided to drop the witness tampering charge. This is arguably crucial for the defense, as both Hamilton and her mum, Felicia Holmes, seem to hold some key evidence for the prosecution, as becomes evident from the messages that Holmes sent to people allegedly involved in the murder, such as Bortland, as well as from both Holmes and Hamilton's initial talks with the investigators. However, their refusal to testify about that alleged evidence in court has so far played very well for the defense. So well, in fact, that Felicia Holmes' hostile testimony during the first trial arguably weakened the prosecution's case considerably, as it would paint them as bullies going after ordinary law-abiding citizens.
When you first took the stand, you said, "I feel threatened."
Yes, sir, I do.
Who do you feel threatened by?
Christine, Your Honor. Christine Bradley, the prosecutor's office.
This prosecutor?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Overall, it seems that most people still think that Melly is ultimately cooked when it comes to his retrial, and as I've discussed throughout this video, I do personally think that he probably did kill his friends, in my opinion. So I would never claim that he will absolutely beat this case, but what I am saying is that particularly when it comes to the state's charges, the existence of evidence is one thing, but the investigation that produced that evidence is another one entirely. And as the first trial already made it clear, this investigation, unfortunately for the state, contains some very serious flaws, which is why it would be a mistake to underestimate what an elite defense attorney like Drew Findling can actually do when it comes to picking apart a case that's already full of holes, exploiting every single procedural mistake to turn even a strong narrative against Melly into serious reasonable doubt. And in a trial where the margin between conviction and another mistrial is razor thin, that might end up being all the defense needs. Because if the prosecution won't offer Melly a plea deal that at least avoids the first-degree murder charges before the retrial, they likely would after another mistrial. But then again, regardless of where the truth ultimately lies, before Melly will have his time in court again, 8 years will have slipped by. Already, Melly has spent the better part of his 20s behind bars, effectively serving time of a serious conviction without ever receiving one. And that harsh reality is likely not lost on the prosecution. So no matter what you think of Melly, or if like me you think he probably did kill his friends, America is all about true and balanced justice. Innocence.
Hey, I'm just gonna end the video saying this. Free Melly, nigga. He ain't do nothing. Yup.